I know this is going to become an issue once the film hits theaters, so I'm just going to go ahead and address it. Edge of Tomorrow is based on the Japanese novel by Hiroshi Sakurazaka. It was then translated and released here in the US under the Haika Soru imprint. I don't know if it's owned by Viz or if there's some sort of partnership going on, but that was the company that released it, and I don't know if it was released around the time Edge of Tomorrow was gearing up for production or around the time it was being advertised, but I do know that Viz was releasing a comic adaptation of the novel. I don't know if it's divided in single issues or if it's going to be a single trade, but based on my understanding of it, there's apparently one major discrepancy between the source material and the movie. Any of you who are familiar with the novel All You Need Is Kill will remember that the main character is Japanese. His name is Keiji Kiriya. Whereas in the movie, the main character is Tom Cruise. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, whitewashing has always been a point of contention for me when it comes to certain films. That's why there are certain films that I absolutely refused to pay money to see in theaters back when I basically had to pay for my own tickets to get to certain films. I mean, I still have to do that technically, but I digress. And really, it's because of that. That's one of the reasons why I have yet to actually watch Argo, despite the numerous recommendations from a lot of my friends. Now, I know it's easy for people here in America to dismiss it as a non-issue, but let's face it, there are a hell of a lot more well-known Caucasian protagonists than there are for any other ethnicity. And really, that's just not right. It just isn't. I mean, take out the fact that there are a few positive role models for kids of other ethnicities. Take out the fact that tokens are still very much a thing. The reason why I take issue with it is that it pretty much shows a sign of creative stagnation and reinforces harmful stereotypes. Now, what do I mean by creative stagnation? Well, part of what type of background a character grew up in is something that you need to kind of think about if you want to make the character feel like a real person, as opposed to just a cardboard copy of some other well-known character. And off the top of my head, characters that actually have some pretty good characterization that make use of their ethnicity, I mean really right off the top of my head, would include characters like Miles Morales in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. And so, really, it just, to me, feels like laziness. And as for the harmful stereotypes, it just reinforces the stereotype that apparently only white people do anything important. And really, that just isn't right. It just isn't. So, yeah, that's all I can really say about it. I'm mainly mentioning this so that way, if people do bring it up, I don't want to come across as someone who effectively ignored it. But frankly, this is a topic that's a lot larger than I'm equipped to handle. So, I'm just putting this up there. Yes, I'm aware of the whitewashing, and while it is still very much a complaint I have about the film, there's not really much else I can say about it in that regard, but it is still something that did bother me while watching. So, yeah. That out of the way, let's begin the review. Let's start with what I liked about the film. The story and the characters were very well written. It was very easy to get invested right from the get-go, and while the film does play out as your typical sci-fi action-adventure film, it at least has some teeth to it to make it stand out against some of the other blockbusters a little bit in what is already a crowded movie season. It's not quite as heavy-handed or cerebral as, say, Elysium. It is not quite as abstract and just WTF'd up as Transcendence. It pretty much is straightforward in its presentation and doesn't try to be more than what it is. The only criticism I can give this story is that the film does drag a bit in the middle as we go through the frequent resets on our way to the climax. I mean, they did the smart thing by not showing him the complete reset, but just have kind of the scenes playing out in the wake of him resetting and just kind of, well, continuing where he left off, like if you were playing Contra, for example. But it does drag a little bit as we're kind of working our way to the big major revelation. From a technical standpoint, while the film is put together really well, the dark and shaky imagery just doesn't mesh well with 3D. I mean, that's just kind of getting to be a pet peeve of mine of everybody, oh yeah, well, let's just put it in 3D to rake in the extra dollars, even though the imagery of our film just doesn't work for it. I mean, it's the same problem that I had with Godzilla. I mean, during the more well-lit and some of the more atmospheric stuff, the 3D worked, but for the most part, you could tell that they planned this with 2D in mind, and 3D only really being added as an afterthought just to rake in the extra surcharge money because of how inflated everything is getting in the box office. All in all, whitewashing complaints aside, I really enjoyed this film. It's well written, well paced, and carried by a strong cast of characters. That said, don't see it in 3D, as some of the dark and shaky imagery of the action scenes just does not work well with the 3D technology that exists now. And really, it just felt like that a lot of people making these movies are still thinking in terms of 2D imagery when making these movies and not actually planning around 3D. So really, don't pay more than $8 to see this movie if you're seeing it in the evening. Save yourself the surcharge for 3D, because frankly, this film can be enjoyed just as easily in 2D. And really, if you like straightforward science fiction movies, then you'll really enjoy this film. It's at least a lot better than Oblivion. That said, I give Edge of Tomorrow a 5 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. Tune in Friday where I will wager my credibility as a nerd fighter as I take a look at The Fault in Our Stars. See ya then.